I love The Legend of Zelda. It's very easily one of my favorite game series ever. I have so much nostalgia for them as I grew up playing these games, and I can go back and point out how this series alone has influenced my love for certain games and genres today. To begin, Ocarina of Time was my first Zelda game, and from what I can recall, one of the very first video games I ever played. I remember playing it as a kid no older than 4 and just being in awe at what the game had to offer. It was a magical experience, and being a kid, as I would run around aimlessly getting lost in the world of Hyrule, my brain would run wild with theories and ideas. I would have vivid dreams of being in the world, and I just couldn't get enough of it. Despite the countless hours young me put into the game, I only beat the game 12 years later when I was in high school. I would go so far as to say that it's one of my favorite games of all time, and I wholeheartedly agree that it's worthy of being the most critically acclaimed game in history. It was the game that brought Zelda to the third dimension, and we can honestly say it revolutionized the action-adventure genre, as its influence can still be felt in games that are released to this very day. Majora's Mask was my first taste at a game that requires some exceptional time management skills, forcing you to really use your brain and pay attention to every detail in some of the finest crafted dungeons and world in the entire series. And the fact that this was just the result of around 2 years of development is absolutely insane to me, and shows how talented the Zelda team truly is. Able to push themselves to their limit and make do with what they had to create something truly memorable. It's without a doubt my favorite entry in the entire series, and that's in part due to its brilliantly existential and deep story that has some incredibly emotional moments. Hell, replaying through it, I still find myself wiping away tears after Anju and Kafei's quest, or interactions between Romani and Cremia, especially on the final day. It's definitely the reason I love storytelling in games, and get attached to characters easily. Just like Ocarina of Time, I was but a kid while playing this game, and while some of the darker themes might have gone over my head, this dreary and ominous atmosphere really drew me in and kept me hooked. Speaking of characters, though, Twilight Princess has some of my favorites. From design, personality, and motives like Midna, Zant, the hero's shade, Yedo and Yeda, and of course this incarnation of the main trio. Link being a simple farmer turned hero is so damn cool to me. It gave him so much more character than the simple chosen one archetype. Also, we can't mention this game without talking about the more darker and grittier storyline and art style, which still holds up well to this day, despite having been released on the GameCube in 2006. It's the closest we got to what some would consider to be a mature Zelda game. Plus, it's the only one so far to score a T rating. I really enjoy when the Zelda series doesn't shy away from these darker themes. Sometimes family-friendly content needs to dive into the darkness. I mean, I'm sure you can think of times where your favorite show or movie from your childhood dove into nightmare fuel. It's exciting and scary sometimes, but it also makes it memorable, especially in the eyes of our kid selves. Skyward Sword, despite all of its shortcomings, was so memorable for me, and once again had me tearing up towards the end, with its phenomenal story and epic climax, the story which solidified the beginning of the Zelda timeline as a whole. which is one of my favorite overarching stories in gaming history, even with the constant debate over the timeline, which I certainly have my own opinions on, but regardless, there are no doubt connections between every game. Even though motion controls are a bit of a contentious addition, I can say that this entry has one of the best combat systems as a result of them, requiring precise timing and focus. I think proof of the excellence of the combat system is that while replaying through the HD version without motion controls, the combat was still so exhilarating. You can truly feel the impact of everything and get immersed in the action. Although I personally say Majora's Mask has the best dungeons, many people argue this entry has the best dungeon designs, and it's hard to argue with dungeons like the Ancient Cistern and the Sand Ship. Though at the time of recording this, I have yet to play Wind Waker, I've heard it has one of the series' most compelling stories, and the Great Sea is one of the more fine-tuned settings, almost being open world before we really started seeing open world games pop up. Although I don't dabble in 2D games much, A Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, and the original Legend of Zelda are renowned as some of the best, and the bits I have played of those, I fully understand why. There's a reason you'll see so many indie games choosing to replicate that style of gameplay. It's simple and rudimentary, but really effective if done well. Then we get to Breath of the Wild. Oh man. Breath of the Wild is truly a masterclass in what it means to be an open world game, having something to do in just about every corner of this seemingly gargantuan map. It put a fresh coat of paint on the Zelda name and formula, and like Ocarina of Time before, it's easy to see the impact it's had on future game releases. With its beautiful art style and character designs, this iteration of Hyrule, which is truly massive, yet manages to feel alive and just is arguably the best version of this world, rivaling Termina and Ocarina of Time's Hyrule for my favorite Zelda world. And though it too is not without its flaws, what with the lackluster dungeon designs of the divine beasts, the repetitive nature of shrines, the lack of enemy and boss variety, and that absolutely anticlimactic flop of a final boss, namely its second phase, Dark Beast Ganon, it still manages to be memorable in so many ways. No game is perfect after all, and sometimes the flaws give it charm. Some people would argue that Breath of the Wild isn't a true Zelda game, or it feels more like a spin-off, and though I kind of agree with those statements, it still doesn't take away from the true masterpiece that Nintendo crafted here. Personally, I love the Divine Beasts, and while shrines do get stale and boring after a while, they're really good micro-dungeons, if you will. I feel their singular design patterns are partially to blame for them spoiling after doing so many of them. After all, there are over 100, but regardless of the flaws, there's still so much that this game does right. The story being told through exploring this post-calamity Hyrule, piecing together what happened through environmental storytelling, and reliving Link's memories. It was so cool and unique for the time. And how can we not mention the characters? The 4 champions, Revali, Mipha, Daruk, and Urbosa. They were so compelling and well written, despite us hardly getting to spend time with them in the playable story. You can glean so much just from their designs, the way they speak to Link in the memories and after the dungeons, and the way their people speak of them in present day. Also, this is the game that introduced voice acting to the series, and I personally feel everyone nailed their roles. Well, almost everyone. Sorry, Yonobo. Joe Hernandez is a good voice actor, don't get me wrong. His voice for Daruk is great, but his voice just doesn't fit Yonobo. Regardless, as a voice actor myself, I certainly couldn't do better. Speaking of Yonobo, helping build upon the narrative of the champions, we have their successors. Teiba, Saidan, Yonobo, and Riju. They each brought something new to the table, as well as made each region's story stand out. Of course, we can't forget characters like Paya, Hudson and Bolson, Robbie and Pura, Master Koga, Cass. Even minor NPCs really shine, like Dorian and his family, Looney the Guardian Lover. Hell, even Hestu really brought this fictional world to life. Like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask years before, Breath of the Wild captivated me and has solidified itself as one of my favorite games of all time. So you can imagine my excitement and joy when in 2019 Nintendo announced a sequel to Breath of the Wild was coming. However, well, you've seen the title. You know where this is going. Tears of the Kingdom left a bitter taste in my mouth. I have extremely mixed feelings about it. I certainly enjoyed my time with it, and it had some truly great moments, but I recall at a certain point just feeling torn. I mean, a sequel to Breath of the Wild. That was a prospect that seemed like gold, but man, it fell oh so far. The beginning was great, and so was the ending, although I have some gripes with the ending, but we'll discuss that when I talk about the story. So many things just didn't sit right with me about this game, and I originally thought it was just me. Perhaps I was just getting burnt out with open world games. Maybe I'm just being overly critical. Maybe I was just expecting too much. I continued playing and kept having this odd feeling in the back of my mind. It began after I finished my second dungeon, which for me was the water temple, and just continued to fester as I made my way through the game afterwards. Finally, at one point, I had to put the controller down. I couldn't ignore it, as it had hit me what this feeling was. I wasn't having fun. Again, I tried to shrug it off. It's The Legend of Zelda, one of my favorite game series ever. This game couldn't possibly be bad, right? Usually I try to avoid discussions on games I'm playing until after I finish it, mostly to avoid spoilers, but I wanted to see what other people were saying about this game. To my surprise, I started seeing many people sharing in my sentiment, and I realized maybe it's not just me. Like I said, I have such conflicting feelings, because you see stuff like the opening act with the corpse of Ganondorf awakening, followed by the destruction of the Master Sword and waking up on the Great Sky Island. Some of the dungeons, like the Stormwind Arc, the Wind Temple, and the breathtaking build-up to it, the Gerudo Sacred Pyramid, the Lightning Temple, and the new terrifying Gibdo Scourge. And how can I not mention the emotional Master Sword pull, the amazing and intense climax of entering the depths below Hyrule Castle, and that jaw-dropping final battle with Demon King Ganondorf and the Demon Dragon. It's all a real spectacle to witness, being a close second to my favorite final boss in the entire series, beaten only by Ocarina of Time's Great King of Evil Ganondorf and Ganon. It was all peak Zelda, truly, but beyond that, to me, something felt wrong. The longer I played and the more I delved into the world and story, expecting what we saw in the previous entry, I couldn't help but feel an emptiness with the game. Perhaps that's my fault for expecting too much. I felt while there were many things that were a giant leap forward from Breath of the Wild, there were also so many things that felt like an equal or greater stumble backwards, making me say, really? That's what they went with? I'm not the only one who felt this way, and I'm sure I'm not going to be the last. While the gameplay itself excelled and was truly a marvel, the new content felt so shallow. For better or for worse, it's just Breath of the Wild again. I feel pretty confident saying the sequel part got lost somewhere. It barely felt like such, and that was perhaps my biggest issue. The story was an absolute mess, focusing solely on the Zonai and the secret stones, and hardly even mentioning or building upon the events of its predecessor. Despite the game being advertised as a sequel, there is no mention of the champions, barely any mention of the calamity, and the fact that not but 5 years ago, the world was basically ending. It got to the point where some people were debating if the events of Breath of the Wild even mattered, saying things like you would enjoy Tears of the Kingdom more if you didn't play Breath of the Wild. Especially since most of the parts they did bring in and pull from completely contradict everything new they set up. The biggest example, the story was teased to include and dive into the Zonai, something fans had been theorizing about for years. Despite that, they answered no questions people had about them coming into this game. What happened to them being a barbarian tribe of warriors? What's worse is the entire story was focused on them. 60 plus hours, and yet nothing was answered. And with the introductions of the secret stones, this new fancy Zonai magical artifact, everything they built up in terms of power with the Master Sword and Ganondorf completely falls apart. Don't even get me started on the Triforce, or rather, lack thereof. Plus, as seen in the ending, they don't even stay consistent in what the secret stones can do. You're telling me, despite becoming a dragon, Zelda still retains her humanity, despite them repeating that to become an immortal dragon is to lose oneself. Also, they constantly repeated how it was irreversible, yet, again, not with Zelda. Even Link's arm gets fixed in the end, and it makes the events of the entire game feel pointless, with no permanent consequences. Worse still, it completely undermines Zelda's sacrifice she made. We'll get into everything into more detail throughout this video, but frankly, I did not like Tears of the Kingdom. And it's frustrating. As I said, the Zelda series is one of my favorite series of games ever. I've loved every single Zelda game I've played with my whole heart, and Breath of the Wild is among my favorite games of all time. Yet, just over 3 years later, and after many hours, 2 different playthroughs, tons of research and discussion, along with a whole lot of retrospection, I think I'm finally ready to put my thoughts out there and dissect why Tears of the Kingdom was such a disappointment to me. Did I just write an 18-minute long intro for this video? Yes, I did. But I hope that in my coming points, you see that it wasn't for no reason. In fact, a lot of the praise I give for the previous entries really highlight the issues I have with Tears of the Kingdom. Now, to give credit where credit is due, this video is going to be me parroting a lot of points that other people have made about the game. After all, a lot of the more glaring issues everyone seems to agree upon, and I've pointed out in other video essays. Although I do hope to bring some of my own ideas and perspectives to the table, I'll link some of the videos that I really like and that resonated with my opinions I have on the game, like BanditGames and his Zelda rant, Zeltik and his Tears of the Kingdom, a disappointing masterpiece video, Skittybitty and their I Hate Tears of the Kingdom video, and Liam Triforce and his videos of him playing Tears of the Kingdom and his own Tears of the Kingdom retrospective. Please go show them all some love, as this video wouldn't exist without them. With that aside, let's begin with some positives, as Tears of the Kingdom is well deserving of all the praise it gets. I mentioned some of my favorite moments earlier, mainly the beginning and ending points, but to put it in broad strokes, the soundtrack and sound design, the incredible and just flat-out beautiful world and art style, Ultra Hand and the insane things you can do with it, and lastly, the absolute wonder that all this runs on the Nintendo Switch. Yeah, color me impressed, and it is impressive. Tears of the Kingdom is a phenomenal game that, I'll repeat, is well deserving of all the praise it gets. From a gameplay perspective, the fact is, though, is that Tears of the Kingdom felt incredibly shallow to play through. Looking deeper past all the technical mastery, it had quite a bit going, but then it just doesn't do anything special. As I said before, for better or for worse, it's just Breath of the Wild again. While the Great Sky Island, this game's tutorial and iteration of the Great Plateau, was amazing and a jaw-dropping opening act, we never see anything like it throughout the rest of the game. The sky is practically empty, save for 2 temples and the labyrinths. Moreover, once you fall to Hyrule, well, if you watch the other videos, many of them say this is the point where the game falls apart. And I have to agree. Once you dive into that lake, everything the game just built up comes to a screeching halt. You're supposed to make your way to Lookout Landing, so Pura can send you on this back and forth mission to talk with NPCs that all repeat the same thing. Also, she can give you the paraglider and tell you where to go next. Yep, that's right. If you decide to go exploring as soon as you set foot onto Hyrule proper, you won't have the paraglider. It feels so sluggish and doesn't keep up the fluid momentum that was set up. But on that note, is it weird to say that I enjoyed exploring without the paraglider? The entirety of the Great Sky Island was done without the paraglider, and it was unique and fun. It's something that comes up in discussion quite often, but I feel the game was at its best when it restricted the player. You have way too much power in this game, almost to the point where it's overwhelming at times. I almost feel that with all the new Zonai tech, they should have just done away with the paraglider in this game. I mean, there's even a Zonai glider that's so much more powerful than the normal paraglider. Going back to Lookout Landing, this was the first point in the game that had me scratching my head, questioning, how did they think that was acceptable? But of course there's other issues everyone talks about. The fact that shrines make a return with little but cosmetic changes, Koroks returning in exactly the same way, and so on. But for me, there were many pretty glaring moments that could have been so much more than what we got. It seems like they wanted to do more, but there was a case of overcorrection which led to underdelivery. Take the example of the pirates invading Lurelin Village. You hear this from an NPC, and as you gaze off at the village, you see these huge docked ships. Your mind most likely begins to race. pirates. And if you played Wind Waker, you probably get super excited at the anticipation of what could lie ahead. So you charge to the village, and it's just the same enemies you've been fighting in every ordinary monster camp. Lizalfos, Moblins, and Bokoblins. It was such a letdown, and it's not the only one in the game. Just wait. Or how about the Stable Trotters side quests for the Great Fairies? They had so much potential, and I do truly love their designs, yet their quests are either incredibly mindless, annoying, or honestly just uninteresting. It made me hate them. I think the worst contenders by far are what was one of the main marketing points of the game and differentiators from its predecessor, the Sky Islands and the Depths. If I may take a quote from Zeltik, as he flawlessly broke it down by saying, roughly, "The Sky Islands are too repetitive, too small, and just so few and far between. And the depths lack, well, depth." Keeping up with the theme of setting something up only to do nothing with it, your first time entering the depths is intimidating and awe-inspiring. That blaring horn that plays, the ominous atmosphere and all-shrouding darkness, it makes you hesitant to explore for fear of what could be lurking in the darkness. The only thing I can compare to the excitement of first experiencing this moment is the very first time I entered the underground in Elden Ring. This bizarre new world hidden underneath the map we've been exploring. And yet, once you begin to light up the area with the light roots, you begin to see just how empty and repetitive it is. Everywhere you look, exactly the same, with little in the way to differentiate anywhere. There's no unique structures, no memorable encounters, save for maybe your first encounter with a Frox. And worse, all the enemies are the exact same ones you fight on the surface, just with gloom on them. I'm not even saying that they need to add more unique enemies to the depths. It would have been nice, yes, but just imagine if each enemy had a dehydrated gloom variant, akin to the Gloom Hands and Phantom Ganon. Instead of just a normal bokoblin with a dark red aura on them, what if they were withered and frenzied bokoblins? They're much more aggressive and attack and move with very stilted and jerky movements. They would have even had different horns that would give the gloom effect to whatever you fuse them to, once again akin to the weapons you get off of Phantom Ganon. It would have made the depths slightly more interesting and added more unique encounters. Like I just mentioned, yes, there are the Frox, those you won't encounter anywhere else, but that's it in terms of unique enemies. Most egregious is that most of the chests in the depths, and most rewards you'll get from exploring, just have unupgradable armor from the amiibos and DLC from Breath of the Wild. Sure, it's nice that you can now get these items in-game, but it's incredibly disappointing at the same time. Just some ideas that I thought to spice up the areas. Imagine that the depths had different locales. Look at Elden's depths. It already has the slightest difference with the lava, and it stood out as a result. It was exciting because it offered something new to the depths. Imagine if the depths below Lanayru had a thick sludge-like swamp, or under Hebra were these glittering crystals that looked like ice. It would have made those places stand out so much more and give a way to make more unique encounters in the depths. But moving onward and upwards to the Sky Islands, As you unlock more and more of the map, and as the map of the sky fills in, your heart most likely sinks a bit at just how empty it is. Worse still, as you go to explore those islands, you begin to see that they're just the same small clusters copied and pasted. Some don't even have anything unique on them. And just like the depths, there are no unique encounters save for the constructs. The very same ones in all of the dungeons. Even the labyrinths are just copied and pasted from their surface variants. To make the Sky Island stand out more, imagine if you speak to an NPC from the Zonai research team, or whatever they're called, and they say that while exploring the ruins in the sky, they encountered a bird-like creature, but it had a human face, freaking the explorers out and causing them to return, never to go back. So, while exploring the sky, you see a place that would obviously hide a Korok. You solve the puzzle expecting the familiar, but bam, one of these things shows up instead. It thanks you, then flies higher. You follow it, and eventually, way up to where you can barely see the ground, you see it. A village. This village is full of these creatures, or at least it was, but now it's barren, completely empty save for a lone one, much larger and chunkier than the others. They tell you that with the upheaval, their children ran away and got lost, so now you have to find them all and bring them back. Having the Oka in the sky would add a whole new layer of exploration and just give something fresh to do in the sky. It doesn't even have to be a lot, maybe like 30, 40, or even 50 if they're feeling saucy. Forget having 1,000+ Koroks, give us other things to collect. On that note, imagine if the gold Skulltulas and Skulltulas in general made a return in the depths. Having these new collectibles could have given the player new armor sets or even weapons. I went on a bit of a tangent, but those are just some simple things that I feel could have made the newer content feel a bit more, well, new. Just some things to differentiate this game from its predecessor. As someone who loves useless collectibles in games, even I was seriously disappointed with the rewards given to you for actually collecting everything. For collecting all the Koroks, and as I mentioned earlier, there are 1,000 of them, you get the exact same reward as the previous game, a literal piece of shit. And don't even think about completing lighting up the depths. For hitting every single light route and lighting up the entire depths, your reward is the Dispelling Darkness medal. So once again, something completely useless. Yet another thing to just sit in your inventory. It's almost as if the developers are laughing in the face of those who would actually go out of their way to do these challenges. Almost as if they never really thought people would do these things. Then what's the point? It's like, I'm sorry that I enjoyed your game so much that I want to do everything I possibly can in it. At least give us some cosmetic armor like the shrines do, or maybe even unlock something cool, not literally nothing. Even if it's just infinite rupees or infinite Zonai charge, anything else would have been better than just some doodad that sits in your inventory. That's seriously one thing that I really want to touch on and that I feel not many people mention, is rewards for completing things. It's not just the completionist rewards, but just quest rewards in general. They all feel so underwhelming. Not having any unique or worthwhile rewards meant that none of the quests really felt special. Either rewarding the players with a cosmetic paraglider fabric at best, or pony points at worst. What happened to unlocking unique armor sets or weapons from finishing challenges? What they could have done too was unlock new areas for completing certain quests, enticing players to seek out these side quests. But no, the most interesting quest reward in the game is being able to put Link's hood down in a single outfit piece. Yeah, and even that quest is an absolute slog to get through, as nothing interesting happens. In a baffling decision, most, if not all of the issues I said Breath of the Wild had in the intro return. As I keep saying, for better or for worse, Tears of the Kingdom is just Breath of the Wild again. The repetitive and sometimes downright boring nature of shrines remains completely unchanged. Sure, shrines get a new design and theme, but that's about it. I would argue that most of the puzzles in the newer shrines are far worse than the previous ones, as 9 times out of 10, the answer is Ultra Hand. Also, I feel they completely forgot about Recall. We all know that one shrine that is completely broken with it. The dungeons get fixed, kind of. While they're now each unique with their own unique themes, you solve them in the exact same way as Divine Beasts. I think the fact that I can just mention the Water Temple and you can understand what I'm hinting at, that should say something about the new temples. Don't get me wrong, the Wind Temple was great. It being a legendary sky ship was really damn cool, and the build-up of ascending above the clouds and seeing the silhouette of the ship gave me chills. A perfect first dungeon, in my opinion. The Fire Temple was okay. Not nearly as impactful as the Wind Temple, but was still pretty impressive design-wise. It had the size, but very little substance. The Lightning Temple was awesome, easily the best in the game, and the new bug-like Gibdos are genuinely unsettling. I just wish they were used more in the actual temple. The Construct Factory was certainly unique. It could have been designed better to make it stand out more, in my opinion. What I mean is, I feel the Construct Factory looks like every other ruin in the depths, but what we got was still really cool. And of course, the Water Temple, which is, without exaggeration, a contender for the worst dungeon in Zelda history. Also, Hyrule Castle in this game is sort of a dungeon, but oh boy, is it rough. Go here, fight some monsters. Go here, fight some more monsters. Go here, fight even more monsters. Go here, fight the boss. Boom, dungeon over. It sucks. Let's move on. Although the temples were a step up from the Divine Beasts, they still suffer from the same problems they had. The puzzles are almost non-existent in them. There's only one enemy type that appears, the Zonai constructs in this one, and they're just too short, being a small glimpse at something great before they finish. Older Zelda dungeons had a puzzle in virtually every room, and utilized not only all of your tools you have up to that point, but of course what you got in the dungeon. Also, they were tied into the story beautifully. So, that brings me to this point. Why are all the temples in Tears of the Kingdom built by the Zonai? It makes them feel so disconnected from the world, despite the fact that the entire story now revolves around the Zonai. Take the Wind Temple. It's described as this thing of legend, spoken of by the Rito in reverence. You would think that it was perhaps some ancient Rito battleship or something. But nope, the Zonai built it. Or the Lightning Temple. This sacred Gerudo temple that lies buried and forgotten beneath the sand, and was also built by the Zonai apparently. The Fire Temple, an ancient Goron mine within the crater of Death Mountain, long since abandoned and now only spoken of in nursery rhymes. You guessed it, built by the Zonai. The Water Temple? Yeah, also built by the Zonai. Truthfully, the only good thing about the Water Temple was the story behind it. It being an ancient Zora water purification plant was really interesting. So did it really need to be built by the Zonai? And also, in the sky? It really deflates what they had set up, feeling like they just shoehorned the Zonai elements to make them fit into the main plot. I really hate that everything is Zonai in this game. Mentioning the lack of enemy variety in the temples, that issue is still very much there overall. While yes, they added newer enemies, there's still less enemies in Tears of the Kingdom than in the original Legend of Zelda. While it could be argued that the original Zelda was pixel graphics and Tears of the Kingdom is actual 3D models, I don't think that's a good enough excuse. Where are the Skulltulas, the Stalfos, the Redeads? Where are the Poes, actual enemy Poes, the Dodongos, the Deku Scrubs and Deku Babas, anything else? Some might argue that all the enemies I listed are scary, but look at what they did with the Gibdos, the Gloom Hands, and Phantom Ganon. This game can get unsettling, and was practically advertised by being a more creepier experience, with Ganondorf's revival. So why didn't they add more? Why didn't they lean into the horror like they've done in previous titles? They don't have to add things like the Dead Hands or the Twilight, but still, give us something. Going back to the prospect of adding pirates, perhaps some would argue that Nintendo doesn't want us slaying human enemies, hence why they put bokoblins and such in place of them. Well, we already got the Yiga, so why couldn't they add pirates? To me, it seems like there's no explanation other than they just didn't want to. Or worse, they simply didn't care. Just like the temples, the bosses were also a pretty mixed bag. Colgera was the first boss I and most people fought, and it was so incredible. Sure, it's pretty easy and more cinematic than anything, but once again, for a first dungeon boss, it was amazing. Like I said in the intro, I haven't played Wind Waker yet, so I have no nostalgia for it. But that being said, when the music kicked up, holy shit. This is on the same level of emotional impact, if not greater, than hearing Gwyn's theme in the Soul of Cinder's second phase in Dark Souls 3. It really gave me a false sense of hope for the other bosses. Next, I did Mukdarok, and it was pretty disappointing. Then there was Marbled Goma, which I also didn't like. It was just bland and bare bones. Its design made it painfully obvious what you're supposed to do, not challenging in the slightest. However, Queen Gibdo was amazing, easily the coolest fight in the game. Not only was she thematically awesome, but she even shakes up the formula, briefly fighting you at the beginning only to flee and of course fight you at the end. Also, she was pretty difficult. Phantom Ganon was the only redeeming part of the Hyrule Castle dungeon, but I do feel that his impact is unfortunately slightly diminished by you being able to fight him after taking on the Gloom Hands. But he's still really cool regardless. The Seized Construct was fun, but also kind of annoying, since we literally just get Mineru's Construct, and don't really get a chance to get accustomed to using it other than a straight line of enemies. Like, imagine if there was more of the dungeon and puzzles to solve so that we get used to the way Mineru's Construct works. Just saying, it would have been cool. Lastly was Demon King Ganondorf and the Demon Dragon, which, as I've said, are a contender for my favorite final boss in Zelda. If you were keeping track, only about half of the bosses I enjoyed, just like the dungeons. It seems to me like, despite the 6 years of development, so much of the content in this game wasn't thought through or only given merely a surface level thought. I never explored Kakariko Village deeper than just walking through it. I never even went to the Lost Woods or Korok Forest. I never did the Yiga quest line or got the auto build ability. I barely did any of the side quests. I barely explored the Sky Islands and the depths. Hell, I feel I barely explored the surface. I did maybe 60-ish shrines, which is less than half of them, mind you, and I still felt sufficiently prepared for the endgame. I didn't do what felt like a decent chunk of the content in this game, and it seemingly didn't matter. I missed nothing. I didn't go to what should have been these important areas, and it didn't matter. I don't like being that person, but if this game was in development for 6 years, and they reused so much content, and the content they did add uniquely for this game was super shallow, what were they working on for so long? The physics engine? Ultra Hand? Maybe. I'm sure the global pandemic we had didn't help with development, but why? Why is everything new so paper thin? The Zelda team is massive, and yet for some reason, despite proving time and time again that they can make earth-shattering games bursting with content and passion, this one just felt so hollow. I think this game is a prime example that linearity isn't bad, especially for the Zelda series. The longer you play, you begin to see that they just repeat a lot of content. The Depths is the perfect example to see this issue at play. I already mentioned how disappointing quest rewards are, and that's why I didn't do much of the side quests. And it's like this throughout the entire game. Despite everything I just mentioned, there is one glaring thing in my eyes that bogged down my experience. Isn't this game supposed to be Breath of the Wild's sequel? That, to me, is one of the most infuriating things. Why do only some people remember Link? The most glaring things that doesn't make sense. Hudson remembers Link. Of course he does. You helped him build Terrytown. You were there at his wedding. You know who else was there? Bolson. And yet he doesn't remember Link. Hestu and all the Koroks don't remember Link, despite Link having the Master Sword at the beginning of the game. How are they supposed to forget the Hylian who can not only see them, but is the one capable of pulling the Master Sword? Also, he saved Hyrule along with the champions. No one even mentions the champions or Link's deeds in Breath of the Wild. It seems like Breath of the Wild and everything that happened in it just didn't matter. Despite this, being a sequel. In case I haven't made it clear, out of everything, I found the story of Tears of the Kingdom to be the most disappointing part of the game. The story taking place in the past worked for Breath of the Wild, as Link was in stasis for 100 or so years, having lost most of his memories. Not only that, but the world almost ended while he was out. So exploring the world after the calamity and having to piece it all together from environmental storytelling and visiting the locations in the pictures Zelda took just worked. Plus, learning what happened during the calamity from the spirits of the champions after defeating the dungeons helped build Link's relationships with them and give the champions themselves more character in turn. Tears of the Kingdom's story taking place in the past, piecing together what Zelda experienced while she warped back to the past through visiting the spots of the dragon's tears, just didn't meld well with the world. In my opinion, as a result of this method of storytelling, the world we explore feels so empty. It feels even more shallow when you start to see that these zonai are everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Almost everything new in the game can be explained with the zonai, and yet most bafflingly, we still learn nothing about them in the main story. I said it earlier and I'll say it again, I hate that literally everything is zonai related in some way, shape, or form. Despite this fact, we get very little information on the zonai and this new imprisoning war, if you can even call it that. This is the obligatory part where we talk about the zonai sages and the whole Demon King Secret Stone cutscenes. However, I don't think I need to dive into that since every other video on Tears of the Kingdom does so. Plus, I feel I'm already repeating so many things you may have already heard. All I'm going to say is it's extremely boring and extremely unnecessary. We could have gotten so much more. Skipping to the end, there's a part of me that wishes Zelda remained a dragon after everything is over. Imagine after the battle with the demon dragon, Link descends to Lookout Landing, everyone around him cheering and reveling in the defeat of Ganon once again. Link separates himself from the celebration, then you hear a soft roar. Link turns and sees Zelda staring at him in the sky, before closing her eyes, shedding a single tear and flying away. Link goes and interacts with the tear and gets one final memory. A memory of him and Zelda. Zelda saying, "Link, no matter what, I will always be by your side," as the credits roll. Zelda is forever stuck as the Light Dragon and could potentially be referenced in newer games. The ending we did get is pretty good, and Zelda saying, "Oh, Link, I'm home," nearly made me weep, but there was something about it that just didn't sit right with me. It kinda rang hollow. They had the perfect opportunity to put a more bittersweet ending akin to what they did in Twilight Princess. I feel this more ambiguous, bittersweet ending would have suited the theme of the game more than the generic happily ever after ending we got. Sure, you could argue that if Zelda stayed a dragon, she wouldn't be able to be reincarnated, but her turning back into a human takes away from the sacrifice she made immensely, feeling almost as if we end the game in the same state we began the game. Nothing gained and nothing lost. Apart from the story, these characters were just not interesting. Rauru, Sonia, and Minoru were interesting, yes, but we barely get to know them. Rauru towards the beginning, Minoru towards the very end of the game, and Sonia never. And what hurts the most is Rauru and Minoru are the only two Zonai we see in the entire game, and we learn nothing about them. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk about the Zonai issue in a second. Every other NPC, I don't think any of them hooked me in the slightest. Cece maybe, but even her story was a slog to get through. In fact, I feel most quests in this game were just not interesting at all. And what hurts the most is how they turned Ganondorf into a generic evil video game villain, despite the fact that in previous Zelda games, he had such an interesting and unique backstory. In this game, he's just power mad. I'm sorry, but that's not interesting. Most of the returning characters get a makeover, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Some of these changes they made really made them so bland. Characters like Pura, Robbie, Paya, I don't know what it was, but they seemed like shells of their former selves. Sure, Pura's new design is incredible, but beyond that, what's her character? I 100% agree with skittybitty when they said that Pura should have been the new Sage of Spirit, as she parallels Minoru in so many ways. Like many things in this game, it feels like missed potential for something greater. Robbie is still Robbie, but Paya? They made her so boring. Granted, I really didn't do much in Kakariko Village or whatever quest she may have you do, but she felt so meh when I talked to her. Am I remembering these characters wrong? Were they always like this? And where's Cass? He's nowhere to be seen. Let me once again bring up the Zonai sages, how they all repeat the same thing and have absolutely no character or personality to them. They don't even get names. Imagine if instead of these nameless, masked sages, we got more unique character designs for them. We have these unused designs for the champions in creating a champion. Imagine if the Zonai sages used these designs to show a version of the ancient Rito, Zora, Goron, and Gerudo. Versions of these races that walked the land alongside the Zonai. It would have shown some kind of evolution and world building, and if I may once again say, felt like such a missed opportunity. Also, random side note because I can't find anywhere else to mention this, why was Tulin the sage and not Teba? Teba being the sage would have made for a much better story. I feel having Tulin to take care of would have made him reluctant to take up the title of sage. It's something so small, but it could have made for a much better story in my eyes. I touched on it a bit, but what frustrates me to no end is the fact that everything, and I mean everything in the game, is Zonai. All the temples built by the Zonai. The shrines, Zonai. All the new advanced technology in the world, guess what? Zonai. All the new fancy magical items, the secret stones, all the Zonai. Hylians, Zonai apparently. Zelda, she's got Zonai in her if Rauru's her ancestor. Now, I'm exaggerating a bit for emphasis, but I'm not too far off. The Zonai are everywhere, yet nowhere at the same time, despite everything now revolving around them. Rauru and Minoru are the only two Zonai that we see, and nothing gets solved or explained. Their only defining characteristics are Rauru is the first king of Hyrule and Minoru is his sister. That's it. It almost feels like they just shoehorned the Zonai in without considering how they would connect to the world. To that note, what about the hints of the Zonai in Breath of the Wild? What happened to the Barbarian set, the ruins in Faron Woods? It still doesn't get explained in Tears of the Kingdom. All those ruins are still just as, if not more, mysterious because it seemingly doesn't matter. Those Zonai are seemingly totally different than the ones in Tears of the Kingdom. Those Zonai were barbarians, but these Zonai are yet another advanced tribe that makes magical machinery. Just like the Sheikah before them. It makes no sense to make them nearly identical to the Sheikah. Was it because they needed a stand-in now that all the Sheikah tech was gone? Maybe it's because they needed to keep the gameplay the same as Breath of the Wild, instead of trying something new. Either way, by doing so, this negatively impacted the story of the Zonai, and it's painfully obvious. This might be a bit contentious of me, but I think we need to talk about Hyrule Warriors: Age of Calamity, and how Nintendo should have taken some ideas from this game and brought them into Tears of the Kingdom. I know it's heavily debated whether or not these games are canon. Personally, I think they should be, but I think we can all agree that they're really fun, with some really unique ideas. I think Tears of the Kingdom should have included the elemental enemies, like the fire, ice, and lightning moblins and Hinoxes, and of course the amazing elemental Lynels. With the addition of Fuse, and especially the removal of elemental weapons, you would think that this would be a no-brainer. Or how about the even more terrifying Malice variant, or in Tears of the Kingdom's case, it would be the Gloom variant. I mentioned my idea for the Gloom variant enemies when talking about the depths, but to add on to it, imagine how terrifying a Gloom Lynel would be. They could have really beefed it up and made it a secret mini-boss in the depths or something. And the villain in Age of Calamity, Astor, he was a really cool villain and a really tough fight too, if I'm being honest. He would have felt right at home in a mainline Zelda game, along with side villains like Zant and Girahim. Even more frustrating though, Nintendo said that the most recent Hyrule Warriors, Age of Imprisonment, is in fact canon. How great. This just makes me hate the story of Tears of the Kingdom more, knowing that it was so poorly fleshed out and designed with these gaps in lore and narrative that Nintendo had to make the new Hyrule Warriors game canon to make it make sense. Now tell me again, why aren't the others canon? The original Hyrule Warriors would have fit snugly in the timeline right here, after the divergent timelines sync up and still years before Breath of the Wild. And of course, Age of Calamity takes place before Breath of the Wild. I'll admit that I haven't played Age of Imprisonment, and I have no urge to, but from what I've seen people saying about the game, it's pretty mid. Just like Tears of the Kingdom, the characters are not unique and forgettable. The story is just as flat, and worse still, we still get no lore questions answered. Like, I'm sorry for harping on this so much, but the fact that Tears of the Kingdom's story was so empty and devoid of substance that they had to make Age of Imprisonment canon, and still nothing was answered, is just baffling to me. I know this video has been mostly negative, but there's a part of me that's still torn with this game. I don't utterly hate it, I want to love it, but I just can't. I'm somewhere between feeling mind-numbing disappointment over the state of the game and just gross indifference towards it. There were some things that I did enjoy genuinely and found impressive. Being able to craft anything, anywhere, from literally everything in the world is fun, and honestly just flat out impressive. I just wish that it was encouraged more. The fact that all the Zonai devices exist on a timer really discourages creative builds. I would imagine exploring the sky would be so much more engaging if your flying vehicles wouldn't drop from underneath you after a few minutes. The even more massive, seamless, interconnected world is awe-inspiring and once again a true marvel, but it does so little to differentiate itself from its predecessor. The new dungeons are a giant leap forward, and most are quite impressive, but they still feel like merely a glimpse at what could have been something incredible. There are only 5 dungeons, 6 if you want to count Hyrule Castle, and I enjoyed maybe 3 of them. Plus they have no keys, no unique puzzles, and no unique enemies. They lack the substance that make us love Zelda dungeons. The whole game does so much right, but for every praise I give, I have something negative to add. I hate that most positive things I have to say are always followed by a but. Like I said, perhaps it's my fault. Perhaps I'm expecting too much, but this is the 20th entry into the Zelda series. They've proven multiple times that they know how to make some absolutely jaw-dropping and groundbreaking games. What frustrates me to no end is the fact that I know this game could have been so much more than what we got. All the pieces were there, but I feel like Nintendo tried too hard to keep this game similar to Breath of the Wild. So much so that it feels like no more than missed potential. I hate to say it, but it feels lazy and like a simple cash grab. They knew it would sell well. They knew these game journalists would score it incredibly high because people loved Breath of the Wild. So they just didn't go the extra mile to make Tears of the Kingdom stand out. I'll repeat again and again, I want to love this game, but the glaring flaws, the inattention to details, and the flippant disregard for its predecessor keep it from being something that I would consider memorable, for a good reason at least. At the end of the day, I unfortunately agree with people when they refer to Tears of the Kingdom as $70 DLC. I kept repeating it throughout the video, and I'll say it one final time. Tears of the Kingdom is just Breath of the Wild again. For better, and most certainly for worse. Despite everything, I did finish the game, and I did enjoy my time with it. But once again, I feel like it could have been so much more than what we got. Sadly, if you want to experience good Zelda dungeons and story for much less money, go play one of the older titles. Or better yet, go play some indie games like Tunic, Crosscode, or Unsighted. Well, that's gonna be all from me. This was a hefty video to make. The script alone took me 3 years to write and polish. I doubt I'll make one of this length or this negative ever again, but I'm glad I finally got my thoughts out there in the world. Please let me know what you agree with and definitely what you disagree with. Also, please check out the channels and videos I've linked in the description. They all deserve so much love and are definitely better than my video. Regardless, I shall now return to my regularly scheduled positive videos. I love you all. Take care.